Hi everybody, this is Charlie. This is my video blog entry trying to summarize the Marvin Carlson chapter. Um, as the way I see it, performance art started as something that was opposed to theater, that it was things that weren't theater and sort of rejected theater, and also rejected language. And this all happened in favor of things that were more body oriented and movement oriented, and also things that were spectacle oriented. Then eventually, all of that gives way, and language starts to play a role again. And the opposition to theater starts to erode. But let's start back over at the beginning. Carlson starts talking primarily about body art and also about sort of action-oriented art, like things happening. One of my favorites that he talks about is the art of drinking beer with friends is the highest form of art, which was an event where people drank beer in a beer garden, and that was considered sort of a living sculpture or human beings working together to create a moment of conceptual art. He says on 104 that theater was the most common other against which this new art was defined. And what I take that to mean is that this new art was designed specifically to not be theater, even though it was action oriented. And oftentimes, I guess that meant that the people were being themselves, not portraying a character. There was no pre-prescribed script. There wasn't necessarily done in a theater space. So there's that kind of body art. And then also, in addition to that, there was spectacle kinds of art. There was both spectacle and technology kind of art. This spectacle art tend to happen in gallery spaces, and it tended to be visual and aural, like hearing. And he talks about Anthony Howell, who we're going to read about later on, and the theater of mistakes. And the theater of mistakes, this is on 106, he talks about it was meant to have unpredictable rituals, ceremonies, and images and that kind of thing, creating these unpredictable, bizarre events. There were also new vaudevillians and new circus acts that had things like jugglers and clowns and acrobats that were doing those kinds of performances. There were also outdoor spectacles or site-specific spectacles, again, not in theaters. He talks about Richard Foreman, and Robert Wilson, both of whom were theater artists, and their work happened in theaters, but it was very avant-garde and non-narrative and very spectacle-oriented, again, very visual, very aural. It was this thing that you saw and witnessed rather than a story that was necessarily being told. And then he starts talking about people who were more identity-oriented and monologists, people like Whoopi Goldberg, Eric Bogosian, and Spalding Gray, and Laurie Anderson. And that is where we arrive back at something that almost looks like theater and has an emphasis on text. So we started with this notion of body art and then moved into this more spectacle-oriented thing, both of which were resisting theater. And then eventually we got into things that were more theatrical, or at least in a theater, like Robert Wilson and Richard Foreman, and then things that actually really had text or were language centric, like Spalding Gray and Laurie Anderson. So there are a lot of questions I could ask about this. I think that one question I want to talk about is, if all of these things can be considered performance art, what could not be considered performance art, or rather, what do you need to do to consider something performance art? And also talk about what is happening in performance art since Marvin Carlson wrote this chapter, because that's an important question as well. So that is my summary, and I've had some key quotations in there, or key citations of the text, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope that this helps you create your own summaries of future readings, and I'm out.